Hello, this is Jane Goodall, and I'm going to start off by greeting you with the greeting call, the distance call of the chimpanzee. I think it's important to bring the voice of the animals into this conference. I was born loving animals. I watched them as a small child. My mother came into my room when I was 1.5 and found I'd taken a whole handful of wriggling earthworms to bed with me. She said, "Jane, you were looking at them as though you were wondering, how do they walk without legs?" Well, she explained that they'd die if we left them there, and we took them back into the garden. And then, when I was 4 years old, she took me to stay for 2 weeks on a farm for a holiday, a proper farm where animals were free to roam about in the fields. And the hens pecked around in the farmyard. Well, they slept in hen houses at night, and there were nest boxes around the edge where they laid their eggs. So my job was to collect the eggs. And apparently I began asking everybody, but where does the egg come out of the hen? Nobody told me. I remember vividly seeing a hen going into one of these hen houses, and I must have thought, she's going to lay an egg. So with great excitement, I crawled after her, and now I would find out for myself. Well, mistake, squawks of fear, she flew out. And I must have realized that no hen would lay an egg there. It was frightening. So I went into an empty hen house, and apparently I waited for 4 hours. And my mother had even called the police. Yet when she saw me running towards the house and my excited eyes, she sat down to hear the wonderful story of how a hen lays an egg. And that was the making of a little scientist, asking questions, not getting the right answer, starting with curiosity, deciding to find out for yourself, making a mistake, not giving up, and learning patience. It was all there. And I want to pay tribute to my mother, because it was her support of me that I think enabled me to do what I've done. If she'd reprimanded me, "How dare you go off without telling us," it might have crushed that scientific curiosity. Well, I dreamed when I was 10 of going to Africa to live with wild animals and write books about them. And eventually I got there, as you probably know, and spent years studying chimpanzees, our closest living relatives. When I began the study, nobody knew anything about chimps in the wild, but there was a wonderful book written by an Austrian psychologist, Wolfgang Kohler, called The Mentality of Apes. And I read about this chimpanzee colony he studied. It was on Tenerife, and he talked about the different chimpanzee personalities and their intelligence and the way they responded to the tasks he gave them to do and how they were all different. So that was my total knowledge about chimpanzee behavior. But other scientists said, well, you can't pay any attention to that. Those chimpanzees aren't normal chimpanzees. They're only intelligent because they've been with people and they've learned from people. So, I didn't really know what to expect when I got to Gombe National Park in 1960. And as many of you know, the chimpanzees ran away from me for weeks and months, but finally I got their trust. And it was David Greybeard, this wonderful chimpanzee here, who first lost his fear of me. And it was David Greybeard that I saw in the 4th month using and making tools. He was picking grass stems, pushing them into termite mound and eating off the termites. And I saw him picking leafy twigs, and to use them as tools, he had to carefully strip the leaves. So using and making tools, to see that in a wild animal back then was really exciting, because Western science believed that humans and only humans used and made tools. I was excited because I knew that, but I wasn't surprised because I read Kohler. At any rate, thanks to David Greybeard, I got to know the chimps of the community, their personalities. They're as different from each other as we are. And I got to understand more and more about their behavior, how they have emotions like happiness, sadness, fear. They show grief, anger. I learned more about the different ways they used and made tools. And so I was really beginning to understand these fascinating creatures when Louis Leakey told me that I needed to get a degree. I hadn't been to college. He said there was no time for an undergraduate degree, and he'd got me a place in Cambridge University. Well, I was nervous. I had to do a PhD. And imagine how I felt when the professors, so many of them, told me I'd done everything wrong. The chimpanzees shouldn't have had names. No David, Greybeard, Flo, Mike, Goliath, and all the rest. They should have had numbers. That was scientific. And I couldn't talk about chimpanzees having personalities, minds capable of solving problems, or emotions, because those were unique to us. We were separate from the rest of the animal kingdom. The difference was one of kind. But fortunately, I'd had a wonderful teacher when I was a child who had taught me that in this respect those professors were wrong. And that was my amazing dog, Rusty. Rusty taught me that animals, of course, have personalities, minds, and feelings. And I had other animal pets as a child. My guinea pigs were intelligent. I took them for walks with little harnesses. And I had a highly intelligent hamster. And so I wasn't surprised to find how amazingly intelligent chimpanzees are. And I got my PhD and went back to Gombe and built up a research station. And gradually, and I think the chimpanzees really helped to break that belief that we're separate from the rest of the animal kingdom. And gradually we've got to learn more and more about animal intelligence. And it's not just the great apes, the chimpanzee, the gorilla, the orangutan, but also elephants. How intelligent are elephants? And pigs. Pigs are as intelligent as dogs. Some of them are more intelligent than dogs. There's a famous pig in South Africa who loves to paint. She's called a pig Picasso. And then people began to discover that birds were incredibly intelligent, and crows particularly, and parrots can do very complex problems. And crows can do some tests faster than an 8-year-old human. It was very surprising to people to find that octopus so different from us, their brains so different. They do have a central brain, but in each of their 8 arms they have brains, and the arms can act independently. But the tests that they've been given that they can do, amazing. And out in the wild, an octopus, I don't think all the species, but at least 3 of the octopus species have been seen taking half clam shells or 2 half coconut shells. They carry them as they walk across the ocean floor. They get to where they want to hunt, and they wriggle their way into 1/2 of their coconut shell or clam shell, and then reach out with a tentacle and pull the other one on the top. They've made a house where they can hide, and they need this because they have soft bodies, no outside protection. And then you see 2 little eyes looking out, and an unwary fish goes by and boom, they catch that fish. Well, we know now that bumblebees can be taught to roll little balls, and if they drop them down a hole, they get a nectar reward. Other bees who haven't been trained can do the same just from watching. And of course, you know, the honeybees are so amazingly intelligent with their waggle dances, telling other bees where to find the best nectar. There's still a lot of discussion about how much behavior is instinctive and how much is learned. Very often it's a mixture of both. But there's absolutely no question today that animals are far more intelligent than most people used to think. And continually we're finding out new things. More is being learned about the tremendous intelligence and communication of whales and dolphins. When I first began talking about culture in chimpanzees, the scientific community was horrified. But in different parts of Africa where chimpanzees have been studied, they are using different objects as tools for different purposes. So we find that the chimpanzees at Gombe use not only pieces of grass and twigs for fishing for termites, they use long sticks. They have to ensure that they're smooth. They peel away the bark and they use them to fish for these very vicious biting army ants. They push the stick down in the hole and pull the stick through and eat them as fast as they can. Not for long because the ants bite so much. And they use crumpled leaves to suck water out of a hollow in a tree trunk that they can't reach with their lips. And in West Africa, chimpanzees use rocks to hammer open hard-shelled nuts. They hammer open, in some parts of Africa, the kernel inside a oil palm. They eat the outside fruit at Gombe, but they don't open the stone inside. And so in different places, we know that the young ones watch, they gradually imitate. At first they're not very good at the tool using, but eventually they acquire the skill. And one definition of culture is behavior passed from one generation to the next through observational learning. And chimps can be very adaptive. At Gombe, they go to sleep every night up in the trees in a nest. And in most other places too. But where they're being studied in Senegal, where it's very, very hot and dry, they sometimes forage at night because it's cooler. They do the same in Mali. And in both Senegal and Mali, they spend time in the daytime in caves because it's cool. In Uganda, which has the same kind of habitat as Gombe, about the same temperature, but they've learned to forage at night for a very different reason. Their habitat is being encroached by humans. Their own food supply is decreasing. They've learned to raid crops, and it's safer for them to do that in the moonlight. So it's this adaptability that is such a sign of intelligence. And clearly, it's not all instinctive behavior any more than ours is. Well, because we now understand so much more about all these animals, it means that we have to rethink the way that we treat them. We've been going through a terrible pandemic. We brought it upon ourselves by our disrespect of animals. We go into their environment. We crowd them together. That enables pathogens to jump from one animal to another, where it can create a new disease. Therefore, the animals are getting more diseases. But also, as we move into their habitats, they're being forced into closer contact with humans. And that means that one of these diseases is able to jump the pathogen, the virus or a bacteria, jumps onto a human, and if it bonds with a cell, then it may form a new disease. And that was what happened with the virus that led to the current pandemic. But it's not only that we move into their habitat, we hunt them, kill them, eat them, and we traffic them. We send them around the world and sell them in wildlife markets, which is where the coronavirus is thought to have started, turning into COVID-19, in one of the wildlife markets in China. But the wildlife markets are all across Asia, and they're in Latin America. And the animals are sold for food, for medicine, for the leather, And also as pets, the trade in exotic pets. People are buying these exotic pets, and the pets of the animals, wild animals, shouldn't be pets at all. And they come with their viruses and with their bacteria. And this again can lead to new zoonotic diseases. The HIV/AIDS virus began with eating contaminated chimpanzees infected with SIV. This led to HIV in humans. And swine fever began in the terrible conditions of the factory farms. So all of this is bad for our health, but think of the animals. We talk about a species becoming extinct, but when we talk about a species, that species is made up of individual animals, and each one has a personality. Each one is a sentient being and can feel pain. And think of the pigs when they're pig farmed. Think of what it's like for them. Highly intelligent beings, they fear death. They hear the screams of pigs being slaughtered. They are terrified. But do people care? No, they beat them. Secretly filmed videos inside these factory farms are truly shocking, just like the conditions in the wildlife markets. Cruel, unhygienic, terrible for the animals, dangerous for us. So it's really important that we start to think in a different way about our relationships with animals. Think of our pets. How many people really think about the animal? How many people have dogs because it gives them companionship? Or people, indeed it's true, they want to dress up their little dog with diamante collars and fancy little coats and parade them around. They don't think of what the dog wants. I know people in some countries who don't like their dogs to walk about when it's muddy. They carry them in little baskets. Dogs love playing in the mud. And we shut dogs up for a whole day. We beat them if they do their business inside, but they have no choice sometimes. The cruelty that goes on around the world is really shocking. It keeps me awake at night sometimes. So in the future, what should we aim for? We should aim for a different relationship with animals, which means more education, more people understanding, children being taught to respect. And that's the kind of world that I hope we shall end up with. And it's the kind of world that, if we're to truly attain our potential for being humane, then we must treat animals differently. But a last word, we're animals too, and think how we treat each other. There's something gone wrong. We shouldn't be behaving the way we are behaving. And fortunately, more and more people are beginning to understand this and think of different ways to live in harmony with nature, with other animals, and with each other. Thank you.